Welcome to today's web conference, U.S. Azure Partner Community Call for January, presented by your first presenter, Nick Johnson, National PTS for Microsoft. Nick, you now have the floor.
All right, thank you, Kim. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone who's joining us from various parts of around the world. We're so excited to have you here today. This is going to be a great call. Just a quick look at our agenda for the day. After we touch on a few welcome things, I want to go through just a real quick overview of some of the things that we're seeing around the community since we last met, and some new product features and some new opportunities as well that we want you to be aware of. Then we're going to get right into the main part of our presentation, which is Azure networking. We're so excited to have a guest speaker with us today who can bring us a ton of insight that I think you're going to find really valuable as you think about how networking in Azure becomes a part of your business. So very excited for that. As Kim said, throughout the presentation, if you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat window on the side of link, and we'll do our best to answer that. If you think of something after the call, or you want to go a little bit deeper on something, feel free to go out to our Yammer community and post it. Those of us on the National PTS team will be monitoring that and happy to answer any questions through that forum as well. So just 4 things I want to call your attention to that have happened around the community and around Azure as a product in the last couple of months. The first is the remote app service went to GA. And if you haven't taken a look at Remote App yet, I highly encourage you to do that. There's some really nice videos out on Azure.com that show you what it is and how you can use it. And essentially it's a remote desktop as a service, but it's done at an app level. So it allows you to put apps in the cloud, host them, scale them, and secure them, and deliver them to any number of devices across various operating systems and platforms in a very rich way. But it keeps everything secure on Azure, and then Azure's the platform that serves that up. It can be a really nice solution for a lot of customers. So invite you to check out the remote app page on Azure.com. We also released a new series of virtual machine sizes called the G series. And if you haven't had a chance to look at those yet, they are the biggest and baddest, probably some of the most exciting VMs we've ever put out there. So they're huge. I strongly encourage you to check them out. If you have workloads that are big in the cloud, those can probably handle just about anything. So go check those out. Premium storage is another thing. In the past, if you've worked with Azure Virtual Machines, you know that there's been a limit of around 16 terabytes and 16 disks you can attach to any of the Virtual Machines series that were out there today. Premium storage introduces SSD-based disks that can actually be attached to a new series under the D series, and those are actually available to go up to 32 terabytes of attached space, and at a much faster IOPS. I believe the fastest you can get is around 50,000 IOPS per VM with less than 1 millisecond of latency. So if you're looking for speed and performance on any type of a workload, premium storage is going to be a great solution for you. And last, I want to call your attention to an opportunity. If you were a part of the training that Microsoft Virtual Academy hosted back in December called Azure IaaS for IT Pros, you were part of 4 absolutely jam-packed days of training, deep technical training from our product group on various parts of Azure. If you missed that, don't worry. It's all posted out for free on the Microsoft Virtual Academy, and it's broken out into 4 days, 4-hour sessions per day, 4 one-hour sessions per day. Strongly encourage you to go check that out, watch the videos. You can download the slides from the Microsoft Virtual Academy page. So if you go out to microsoftvirtualacademy.com, search Azure IaaS for IT Pros, you're going to find just a wealth of up-to-date technical depth training that can be of great benefit to you and your teams. So strongly encourage you to take advantage of that. And with that, I want to turn the floor right over to Michael Withrow. And Michael is a cloud solution architect for our team here in the U.S., and he is joining us today to talk about Azure networking. So welcome, Michael. We're so grateful to have you with us.
Thanks, Nick. I really appreciate it. Hopefully everybody can hear me loud and clear. I've just taken over as presenter, and looks like I've got the floor now. So as Nick alluded to, my name is Michael Withrow. I'm a cloud solution architect based out of DC. So I currently service customers in Pennsylvania, DC, and Virginia areas on all cloud, public cloud related technology areas. All right, so the premise of this call is really to give everybody a deeper understanding of Microsoft Azure networking and its capabilities. So I'll kind of start out. I've basically broken down into different modules. So start talking about virtual machine networking and security holistically. So poll that it looks like everybody has a pretty good, at least base understanding of Azure and its capabilities. But I'll start out with really talking about, Azure virtual network. What it is a construct, right? So think of it as just really a big address boundary that exists, right? So you'll create your address space, as a 10.0.0/8 or whatever it is, and then you can go through and define, individual subnets and things like that, right? So that's, really the starting point that where we're at. So now inside of that construct, I've defined a subscription, I've defined a single VNet inside of my subscription. Now, what can I do with that VNet? What are the confines, the scale limits, the capabilities that I can do with that virtual network that exists, right? So really looking at, from this perspective, with that virtual network, I have full control on machine names, and with it, remember that is a global namespace, right? So if I go and create test VM01, it most likely somebody else has already got it, so it's going to error out saying that name exists. So you'll get a unique name of that virtual machine that exists inside of that namespace as well. So there's Windows Azure provided DNS as well. So really that's really tied to the cloud services as well, as is called out here. So inside of the cloud service, which is a subconstruct of that virtual network, in there, I'll go through and say, okay, I'm going to have a 3-tier service that is inside of that cloud service, and I'll be able to do DNS resolution inside of that cloud service. Outside of that construct, if I need to provide DNS to virtual machines, right, that are outside of different cloud services, I'll extend that to bring in my own DNS services and things like that. So you can leverage your on-premises DNS server, deploy DNS in the cloud, use public DNS services, or all capabilities that exist of the virtual network for resources that you've deployed inside of that construct. So now I've gone through and I've deployed, I've got my virtual network stood up, right? The first questions that the security team always asks is, thank you for the virtual network. I have this big broadcast domain. How do I secure it? So before we had ACLs, which was our first run at how to create this, but now we've released NSGs, right? It's a short name for network security groups, which is really our layer 3, layer 4 stateful firewall that we have the capability now to deploy inside of that virtual network, right? It gives the customers now the ability to create segmentation and DMZ type scenarios. You can build out access control lists. You have filter conditions with allow and deny at the VM level, at the subnet level, down to the port for a particular VM, right? So the ability to associate, those NSGs with VMs or the subnets, and then and then from that, once I've defined those NSGs, I can build out multiple rules that correspond to the virtual networks that I'm laying across those subnets that exist inside of that virtual network. So then, of course, as well, it has the ability to be updated independently of impacting to the VMs. So you can create an environment where, hey, look, I can define an NSG to a subnet, and then basically I can start layering in virtual machines which will adopt that NSG as that are acquired into that virtual network. So kind of moving on from that, so now looking at internet connectivity capabilities. So in a virtual network, every single address by default is going to be a DHCP address. So when I deploy a virtual machine inside of a virtual network, it's going to get 2 address spaces, a public address space and an internal address space, both of which are DHCP based. So now what we're talking about here at a high level is now I can go through this slide specifically is going through and saying, hey, look, on that load balancer, on the VIP, right, which is the virtual IP of that cloud service, that was a DHCP address as well. And really what we're talking about here is, to get into it, is really at those different levels I can define a static reservation for that DHCP address for my public, for my internal, or for my VIP. And there's scale limits to think about that kind of get into that. I think for the public you're going to be stuck at 10 is really the scale limit that you're looking through inside of a single virtual network as well. So another new feature set that exists is now Traffic Manager, and Traffic Manager is now on its second iteration, and is a DNS-based load balancing service. So really what's really nice about this is it has load balancing capabilities that you see down here. It's talking about you can do a performance-based policy, a round-robin, or a failover-based policy. What's really nice about this as well is it has the ability to, hey, look, I'm defining a 3-tier application in my cloud service, right? And that's an east to west. And now I want to have, active passive or active active type failover capability of my application. So now I can define another copy of that 3-tier application in another cloud service that exists in west. And now I can put that traffic manager service on top of those cloud services to manage that capability. So look at it as, a software-based F5. It lines up really, really close, about 80% of what you'll get out of a functional F5 from a service perspective. And then from there, what's really nice about this as well is it doesn't necessarily have to be an Azure-based resource, right? So I can go through, sorry, let me back up a little bit. I thought there was another slide in there. So now with this does not necessarily have to be just cloud services. So you think if I can do websites, web roles, those kind of things like that, as well as on-premises resources, right? So if I can hit the URL for that, right, I can go through and I can load balance, say I can have, Web 01 on-premises, Web 02 in Azure in cloud service or whatever it is, and I can put Traffic Manager in front of that to roll that stuff over. All right, so now what's new, what we just announced at the last Tech Ed, was the ability to do nested profiles. So it allows you to get a little bit deeper in as far as your granularity for how you'll define your basically your profiles across your different regions as well. So of course it has cross-region failover within a geo. So of course you define, level 1 here in this example is routes to users in the nearest geographic, right? Whether that's US, Europe, and Asia, right? Level 2 perspective, you have the ability to say, okay, hey, look, I want to route to the nearest region of that with cross-region failover within that geo. And then level 3 is load balancing within the region, and then, of course, directing the percentage of that over to flighting. So now with that, I'll kind of move into what do we have for cross-premises, right? So kind of evolving that conversation, right? So hey, look, I have this virtual network. I understand I can deploy resources to it. I can create, I can do static reservations. I can do some policies to that to go through and make sure that's really secure. And now that I've done that, what are my extension capabilities? Can I extend it to another virtual network? Can I extend it to my on-premises network? What does that look like? So, of course, we have VPN capabilities that exist in order for you to do hybrid offerings, right? So here you see we have the VPN capability and the private point-to-site capability as well. So, out of the box, we have the ability to do VPN as one capability, is what we'll kind of talk about here, to do that. And then right now, we've partnered with Cisco, with F5, with WatchGuard and Juniper. And then, of course, you can do Windows 2012 RAS as well. And then just recently, we've announced the ability to do Allied Telesys, Brocade, Checkpoint, and Cisco, and OpenSwan, and all these different type of capabilities through Dell Sonic Wall as well. So really from a VPN perspective, this is all the different capabilities that exist. So with that, so now, okay, I've gone through and I've created a virtual network, and I've gone through and I've applied my policies to it, and I've created a gateway in there, so now I can connect that VNet to other resources, right? So I showed you different, so here look, I've done, I've got that, and I've got an on-premises environment, I'm going to do a Windows 2012 R2, RAS, or whatever it is. But say, okay, now I want to create a very mixed approach. So I can use this VNet capability that exists now, so I can create multiple VNets inside of my Azure environment and say some resources on premises as well. Now I have the ability to mesh all of those networks together. So we have the ability to, and then what I'm really talking about here is just on the VPN side, and I'll extend that conversation in the next slides. But really I have the ability to say, okay, hey, look, I can have a VNet in East, a VNet in West, on-premises in East, and on-premises in West, and I can bridge all that stuff together to build one big broadcast domain, and then I can use NSGs to secure the routing of all those resources that I've just brought together as well. So now this is kind of talking about the exact same thing. So now I can kind of bridge those things together. So to kind of bring that home too, so those VNets don't have to be in the same subscription, right? So I can create multiple subscriptions, have VNets in each of those subscriptions, and then bridge all of those together as well, right? So I can have, I can basically build my routing tables and say, hey, look, I want to have everything routing from VNet 1 to VNet 2 in Azure, and I want all from my on-premises 1 to only talk to VNet 1 in Azure as well. And you have the kind of capabilities to kind of build out basically your route table in a config file now for how that routing will work as well. So now say, okay, great, we've talked about VPN, right? So a couple things to think about from a VPN perspective is when we create a VPN gateway, it's a very special gateway that's just tailored to VPN. The bottleneck for that, I shouldn't say the bottleneck, but that's throttled at 100 meg, right? Because the reason that we did that is you think that that's really running over the open internet, which really, is look at is 80 megs usually with spikes up to say 200 meg on the open internet. So we just made a conscious decision to say, okay, well that gateway is going to be throttled at 100 meg. So now when I'm doing VPN from my on-premises enterprise as an example, and I do a VPN connection to that, I have a single 100 meg pipe that is in active passive mode, by the way. It's not an active scenario to basically connect that in. So that's what we've evolved the conversation, say, okay, so VPN works, great for dev tests, some small enterprise class scenarios, but now what if a customer needs to have 1 gig or 10 gig connectivity? And that's where we introduced ExpressRoute capability. So kind of talking about that as customers want Azure on their network. And then so IPsec VPN or cloud on your WAN, right? So that's really what this is talking about is evolution. Say, okay, now you have multiple capabilities that exist from a customer perspective. Now I have on-premises resources, and I want to extend my resources to the cloud. What are my hybrid alternatives that exist once I've created that virtual network? So now looking at it, really we have 2 ways that you can consume ExpressRoute for your virtual network, through an exchange provider or through a network service provider. Right, so in the exchange provider configuration, right, you see we have this partner network hotel that you're responsible to get the connection from your customer site to that network hotel facility, and they've already got a pre-configured pipe to get from there into Azure. And then for the network service provider, you're going to work with your provider to get from you all the way to Azure. So looking at the ecosystem, right, so Equinix is a great exchange provider that we leverage for a lot of different things. AT&T, Verizon, L3 for all the network service provider connections as well. And we're constantly working with, for each of the countries, as we evolve through, we're constantly working to onboard all the different telcos so that you have those as a portfolio to use when you want to integrate with ExpressRoute. All right, so currently you can see all the different locations that exist. So the idea is that anywhere there's an Azure data center, there's a footprint for ExpressRoute for that particular carrier. And really what that level of effort is each of those telcos is going to have to basically build a DMARC inside of each one of the data centers. So Equinix has to go down and build a point of presence in each one of our 19 Azure data centers. Same thing for AT&T and Verizon and L3, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an ongoing effort that's going on, but we're actively communicating what's the status point of presence for each of those telcos in each of the Azure data centers so you customers can go through and connect to them. Oh, probably should have changed the text. It's a little hard to see. All right. So the next thing is, okay, great. So now I've gone through, and I know I can do VNet through a VPN. I can do ExpressRoute. I've integrated ExpressRoute. I made a customer decision. I'm going to go through. Now how do I do, HADR and path diversity and those kind of things like that? So looking at it, from a ExpressRoute connection, one VNet can be linked to many circuits, right? So the idea is that essentially I can share 10 I can do 10 ExpressRoute connections inside of across a subscription. And then I can share that with 10 VNets as well. So essentially, I could have one gig connection going up to a VNet. I could build out 10 VNets in parallel to that VNet and share that single ExpressRoute connection with those 10 VNets inside of that subscription. So in each circuit, talking about with this connection, I could have AT&T coming in on one VNet. I could have Verizon coming on another VNet as well. Going through. If you look at those ExpressRoute, it's an active-active BGP pair going up. So the ExpressRoute connection is active, but on the gateway side, it's not an active-active gateway that we have on the Azure side. So while it's active-active all the way up on ExpressRoute, right now, if you look at it, that is not active-active. So we're going to go through a change of the gateway service, so that'll be active-active. And then this story is going to evolve a little bit more as we go through as well. So the idea is that, hey, look, I can go through and create multiple connections up, right, from multiple paths, and then give me redundancy. So essentially, I could have a connection from my London office into a VNet that sits in Northern Europe. I could have another connection going up from Amsterdam to another VNet in Western Europe, and then bridge them all together, right? So that's new capability exists, and that's how we achieve HADR right now. With the next version of the gateway, which will come out in the next couple of months, I'll be able to have two connections from the same site going to two VNets, or multiple connections going to the same VNet as well. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, sharing the ExpressRoute connection. Great. So now we have the ability. So like I said, I've extended a ExpressRoute connection into my virtual network, and now due to customer requirements, I have to build out 2, 3, 4, 5 different VNets, or I have to build out other subscriptions or whatever it is with different VNets in them. And does that mean the customer has to buy another ExpressRoute connection? Well, no. They can go through and share that connection with other VNets and other subscriptions if necessary. All right, so now kind of evolving through, now we'll kind of talk through hybrid networking, right? So now kind of adding to the slide, we've kind of changed, you see how it's evolved. So now we have the ability to do VPN, whether it's point-to-site or site-to-site connectivity at 100 meg. Now with the ability to do ExpressRoute, right, which is going to be, there's different flavors of that, 1 gig, 10 gig, 200 meg, 500 meg, and those are going to vary whether or not you're looking at, network service provider or exchange provider for those configurations. And all of the documentation for this stuff in depth is going to be on the Azure.com page as well. So as I alluded to earlier, when you deploy a virtual in Azure, essentially what you're getting a public IP address and an internal IP address, right? That's part of that virtual network. So a lot of customers said, hey, look, I've deployed a domain controller in Azure and I don't want it broadcast on the open internet, so how do I restrict that? So that's kind of the premise where forced tunneling has come around. So now I have the ability to basically so when I deploy a virtual machine, I'm going to get a public address and an internal address. So that's still going to remain, but now that I've built out a hybrid connection, because that's the key term, I need that hybrid connectivity. What I'm going to basically say is on that virtual network, I'm going to basically force any connections to route through the internal network. So the only way that you're going to talk to this virtual machine is from an on-premises resource going forward. So that's a solution that a lot of customers are really starting to dive into and deploy. So I kind of talked about initially too, right now that the gateway is there's a couple of limitations that exist on the gateway that you got to be aware of when you're architecting Azure-based solutions. So in lieu of that, the product team basically built out these enhancements to the gateway. So now I can deploy a VPN-based gateway, and right now it's going to be limited to 100 meg, right? So my max connections, right, is my max tunnels, my VPN tunnels, is going to be 10. but then I can uptick my VPN gateway to a performance-based gateway, and now that's going to basically build that bottleneck or that throughput to 200 meg, allow me to do 30 VPN tunnels. And I'm clarifying VPN because ExpressRoute is still going to be limited to 10. So looking at ExpressRoute, right, you have the ability, that gateway throughput right now by default is going to be at 500 megs, even though you have a 1 gig circuit or a 10 gig circuit running to that gateway, and then you can uptick to the performance-based gateway to give you 1,000 meg aggregate throughput on that. Another thing that I didn't allude to earlier when I was talking through this, it's important to note that currently right now, I cannot have and that's kind of going to this active passive in this DR scenario that I was talking to earlier, is you cannot go through and have a VPN gateway and a site ExpressRoute gateway on the same virtual network. Because currently, right now, there are two different types of gateway, and we restrict customers to only one VNet or only one gateway on a VNet. So basically, when you're going through and making a decision on how to construct this VNet, you need to decide, am I going to do VPN hybrid connectivity or ExpressRoute connectivity? And you'll build that into the configuration of that virtual network. So I think this is a redundant slide, but this is kind of talking about, the fact that the ecosystem is growing as far as vendors that are coming online, as far as doing the VPN as well. And then we just announced Barracuda and Palo Alto networks as well. And with that, I think I've pretty much give a high level of all the different scenarios that exist for virtual networking. And I'll kind of open the floor to Q&A.
All right, thank you, Michael. A couple questions that have come into the chat window. I'll just read them off, and then if you want to talk to them. First one comes from Carlos. He asks, can you use ADFS with Traffic Manager?
Can you use ADFS in Traffic Manager? In what scenario specifically?
Yeah, that I don't know. That's all that was typed in the window. So, Carlos, if you have any more details, you want to put them into the chat window, we can come back to the question there.
So, Sonic, I just saw another one from Andrew. All right, just waiting on that one. So I guess while we're waiting for him to respond, I'll hit the next question in line.
Yeah, so the next one was from Raj, and he says, can I use Traffic Manager for failover at a top level and performance as a nested level?
Yes. So as you go through and you nest your different profiles, you're going to define different routing policies, right? So in each of those policies, you can define different capabilities that exist at the different tiers for those policies.
Great. And Carlos, I don't know if you had a chance to type in any more details on your ADFS with Traffic Manager question yet. So, and then there was perfect. So then the question says, I understand that you can't use CNAME for ADFS.
Oh, so could you basically front load Traffic Manager to give it a CNAME? So I haven't heard of that scenario. I guess I'll figure out a way to follow up with you and see if that can't be done. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I haven't heard that for ADFS.
Okay. Yeah, if you get a response to that, we can post it out to our Yammer community for this whole group.
Sure. And
get it out there. So that'd be great. Let's see, are there any other questions that came in on there? I saw Walter was able to answer some of them in the chat window there. Mike just asks, will we be able to monitor and report on end-to-end latency and performance metrics? And will QoS, quality of service, be supported within our ExpressRoute segment?
So yes, so you're going to get certain QoS capabilities on your ExpressRoute connection. In a lot of cases, depending on if you're going through the exchange provider or the network service provider, you're going to work with your particular vendor to go through and get that level of service integrated into that. And then from a metric and logging perspective, you're going to get certain level of logging is going to be exposed through through the connection as well. But there's some enhancements that we're getting ready to do as well that are going to give more verbose logging on those capabilities, right? So, what's my packet, what's my packet in, my packet out, what's my loss on that connection, and what's all the traffic, kind of coming into that. So we're going to get ready to release more verbose logging on that, but right now we don't have a really good story on that yet.
Okay, great. Andrew had a question that there was a reference in your materials to Dell SonicWall as a VPN appliance. Is there a availability date on that? Is that out there today, or is that coming?
It's already GA.
Perfect. So Andrew, hopefully that answered your question there. A couple other questions that came in. One was for site-to-site VPNs, the number of devices that Azure can work with for dynamic routing and multi-site VPN is limited. Are there any upcoming changes to this?
Yeah, so really the biggest change is going to be around the gateway enhancements, right? So if you look, and hopefully I answered that question when I went to that particular slide, right? But if you look at, right, when I go through, and that's another key point, so while we're talking about it, is in order to do, when we released virtual networks, the basic capability we had is what we called static as well. So once we introduced point-to-site capabilities and VNet to VNet connections, that meant that you had to configure that VNet as a dynamic-based gateway, right? So it's important to understand when you're deploying to an on-premises basically device, that device supports dynamic-based routing as well. So I know Walter and I, who's on the call as well, have done a lot of work with Cisco-based devices, and you need to be very particular when you're going through to make sure that that device supports dynamic routing.
Yeah, a lot of people have asked the question if the ASA devices will support it, particularly because they have BGP capability now. Well, no, they don't. They don't support dynamic routing, and I don't expect they will. So what I've personally done is gone to the Cisco ISR device. It's been really strong for me, and I know some people who have gone to use some of the Juniper devices, and those devices get considerably more expensive when they have that capability. But to my understanding, you can probably get a good used Juniper or Cisco device on eBay or some other type of forum.
Yeah. And then to add to that, so to really dive into that question, right? So now I've gone through and I've built out a virtual network and I've extended my VPN connection to that, and I start stacking in networks and VNets to that, right? And I hit my 10 scale limit, right? So before, customers were just kind of stuck, right? With, hey, look, I've hit my limit. I'm at 100, at 100 meg aggregate throughput on that. My performance is pretty slow. What are my remediation steps for that, right? So the answer was there wasn't much that exists. So now with the gateway enhancements, you could uptick to that performance-based gateway, double your throughput on that, and then also now you can extend from 10 to 30 base connections. Now those are VPN-based connections, so now I can have global, a very diverse global Azure-based architecture, connect all those virtual networks together, and then route them to certain on-premises environments based on, customer demand as well.
Great. Another question came in from Jim. Any timetable or information on allowing access from ExpressRoute directly to Office 365?
So it is something that is on the roadmap and something that is being worked on, but no date has been shared yet. So I know that is a feature set that's imminent, but the date has not been disclosed yet.
Okay, great. Any other questions from the group? Feel free to type them in. And while we're waiting for that too, I want to mention I've gotten a couple of side pings about any additional training on networking and things like that. At the beginning of our session today, we mentioned the IaaS for IT Pros course that's available on Microsoft Virtual Academy. Day 2 kicks off with an entire hour on networking and hybrid connectivity. So if you want to know more about it, there's some free training available there. So feel free to leverage that as well.
So Raj had asked a question about VNet. So if I link multiple VNets together, what's the throughput? So of course, so when I link one VNet, I'm doing that through VPN, so it's going to be aggregated at 100 meg. Unless I go do a performance-based gateway on that particular VNet to VNet connection, then I'll have 200 meg of throughput. Another thing that's going to be on the horizon as well is the ability to do ExpressRoute between those VNets too, but I don't have a firm date on and what that solution is going to look like either coming down the road.
Yeah, but VNet to VNet connectivity within Azure itself would be within the same data center. It'll be within the data, whatever the current networking speeds are within the data center. Of course, across data center, it'll be whatever is within those interconnects. So you don't have any particular limitations on those, other than either you're within the data center and it's VNet to VNet, or it's from data center to data center. And so we don't have any specific speeds for those, other than those. And Michael, do you know if there are any? Do we have a specific set of speeds? I don't know, between data centers.
So everything's highly connected, of course, right? So, I think it's all 10 meg backbone, across all the Azure data centers. But like I said, we aggregate a lot of that traffic. So as you're traversing those VNets, right, you have to traverse through that gateway. And depending on whether or not you're doing a VPN, normal or a performance-based gateway, or an ExpressRoute normal or performance-based gateway, you're going to be throttled at those speeds that I'd shared on that one slide.
Great. Follow-up to the ExpressRoute in Office 365 question. What about ExpressRoute for other Azure services like storage?
Great question. So on there's if you go to Bing, preferably Bing, not Google, and then type in ExpressRoute FAQ, there's a good FAQ on all the capabilities, and you can really do that for all of the Azure services. I encourage a lot of people to do, HD Insight FAQ or Azure Storage FAQ, and then it'll be the top hit on Bing to pull right up. And then in there, what it's going to talk about is that by default, through private peering of ExpressRoute, it talks directly to cloud services and virtual machines, and then everything else, minus a small host of services like Service Bus and Media Services and a couple things I can't remember off the top of my head, are going to be talking through public peering capability like Azure SQL, websites, those kind of things like that. Storage will talk through public peering of that ExpressRoute connection.
Excellent. Mike posted a question there. Will ExpressRoute network providers be able to push public IP addressing to our application without any NAT?
So I haven't heard anything about that on the roadmap, so I'm not sure. Yep, thank you, Daniel. So Daniel posted in the IM window the FAQ for ExpressRoute. Excellent. So in there, it'll detail out explicitly each service that's supported, not supported, and whether it's public or private-based peering.
So we've got time for a few more questions. If anybody wants to type it into the window, we'd love to entertain those for you. This is a great chance to learn from each other and from our expert speakers here.
All right. I don't see any other questions that I missed.
Now, I was trying to keep track of them as we went through, so I think we got them all. But if we did miss your question, apologies. Feel free to retype it in, and we'll try to cover it here. So the next question is, are there any planned changes for point-to-site connectivity to make it more scalable as a remote access solution?
So I think point-to-site is limited at 150 or 125 connections. So I would assume that with the performance-based gateway, that number will go up, but I have not seen any scale limits published yet. Internally, as far as what that number is going to go up to from the point-to-site connections. But you can expect with a performance-based gateway that the number of supported point-to-site connections will go up.
Sounds good. Raj asks another question here. What's the typical setup time for ExpressRoute? Is it quick, or is it multi-day process?
Usually it's a multi-day process. So if you look on the documentation as well, you're going to go through, and whether or not you're doing a network service provider connection or an exchange provider connection, there's a really good workflow for each of the steps required. And I think for the exchange provider, it's a 4-step process, and for the network service provider, it's a 5-step process. Don't quote me on that. And then you're going to go through, and really what you're really doing is you're really requesting a circuit to be built. You're provisioning a circuit, and then requesting with the ISP a circuit and then passing them the shared key and then syncing that shared key, right? So depending on, you're basically, in a couple of cases, you're sending a request over to the service provider, and it's a matter of them provisioning and then responding back to you. So in some cases, the last customer I just worked with, it took them about 2 days to set up an exchange provider connection through Equinix. So that's the normal 2 to 4 days is typically what we're seeing with customers setting up ExpressRoute, but of course that's going to vary.
Great. Tim asks, how about improved manageability of the point-to-site connections? And he put an example there of having to revoke certs and having to use the same cert for multiple people, etc.
Great question. I feel your pain on that one as well, and I have not seen any upcoming enhancements around certificate management through the point-to-site connection. But I'd love to get your feedback on that, and maybe I can escalate it up for you.
Great. And then Robert posted a question that says, with a shared ExpressRoute circuit across subscriptions, would data transfer charges apply?
If you're traversing between zones, because if you're doing a and I'm trying to remember now, if you're doing a network service provider connection, right, egress is not charged, but on an exchange provider connection, you have different data rates that are charged for egress, right? So with that, if you're traversing across zones, you will incur zone transfer charges for those connections. If you're going from resources in zone 1 to zone 2 to zone 3 as an example.
Very good. Any other questions from the group out there? I saw some chatter about the slide deck. If you weren't able to download it, we will get that posted to our Yammer group today. This is Nick Johnson. I'll be the one to post it. So if you just look for a post from me later today, we'll get that up there, and then we'll attach the recording link as well when that becomes available. And if there's not any further questions, we are going to turn it back over to Kim here in just a minute for a closing survey. I would ask you, please fill out the survey, and if you have topics you'd like to see covered on future calls, put them in the comments at the end. We'd love to hear from the community what would be most useful to you. And the name of the Yammer group, Daniel, is actually just Azure Partners on the US Partner Community on Azure. So I can post the link to it here, and if you're not signed up for it, feel free to come join us. Oh, Jonathan beat me to it. Thank you, Jonathan. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kim, and we'll close out the call for today. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next month, and we'll be talking about Office 365 and Azure together, and some of the connection points and the opportunities for you guys as partners, especially there. So thank you. Kim, it's yours.
Thank you, Nick. We have now enabled our feedback survey for this web conference, and you can find the link in the chat feature. Please visit the link and enter your email address to access the survey. We hope that you found today's information helpful. If you enjoyed today's web conference or have feedback on how we can provide you with a better event, please let us know by completing our survey. And the scores are on a scale from 5 to 1, with 5 being the highest score possible. Please take a moment to provide us with your feedback, and be sure to click on the Submit button prior to exiting. And the deck is available under the Attachment section, so you should be able to download it there. And partners may access the web conference recording through the worldwide Microsoft Events site in approximately 48 hours. And I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters, Nick and Michael. This concludes today's web conference. You may now disconnect.